Good morning, this is the Trent England Show. Glad to have you watching this Thursday morning. Happy Women's Day. It is International Women's Day. Google helpfully reminded me of that. I've got some headlines for Women's Day actually coming up in just a minute, but I did want to mention this news seeping out of Britain last night, which is that the former Russian who was a spy for Britain, who is in the hospital fighting for his life along with his daughter. They have now said what the poison was. It was nerve gas, right? Which just goes to the point that I made yesterday. The Russian government's they want people to view them as thugs. They want it to be obvious that when they do things like this. By one count, this is the 14th assassination in Britain, just in Britain, the 14th assassination carried out by against people who were enemies of the Russian state, of the Putin regime. So starting off with that, one more story from Britain, because look, they have socialized medicine in Britain there. So I mean, it's all for the sake of public health. Public health should be great in Britain, right? And what headline caught my eye last night as I was flipping through the world news? It is this one from the BBC. Britain needs to go on a diet, says top health official. The head of Public Health England says that they have to start targeting the foods like what do they say? Pizza, processed meat. I just had some bacon for breakfast, so I mean this is it's getting a little close to home here. But they have a problem. 35% of British 10-year-olds are overweight or obese. And you know, I was reading this thinking, I mean, look, if you're a supporter of socialized medicine out there, I know, you know, most of the viewers, you're conservative like me, you get why that doesn't work. But if you're a supporter of socialized medicine, don't you have to admit that if you take a person and you can tell a person one of two things: either you're going to be responsible for your own health care, your own family's health care, or somebody else is going to pay for your health care and your family's health care. Which person has a better incentive to take care of himself or herself? It's Women's Day, so we'll say herself, right? Who has a better incentive? I mean, obviously, when we tell people you don't have to pay for your blood pressure medicine, you don't have to pay for whatever the treatments are. I mean, we can debate how big the effect is, right? But there is at least some diminution of personal responsibility. Okay. Women's Day, this from Spain, sticking with stories from across the pond, this from Spain. Spanish public sector workers who are women are celebrating International Women's Day by not going to work. I don't know, maybe they could join, you know, I mean, we've seen some of the women's protests in the United States focused around knitting. So, you know, I think we put all this together and, you know, I mean, we encourage the new feminist protest for the 21st century is to stay home and knit. How very forward-thinking of them. Meanwhile, in Belgium, some schools in Belgium are canceling Mother's Day because it is sexist. And one more story here, this from the BBC. I thought this was, well, I'll just read you the headline. The headline is "Climate Change Impacts Women More Than Men." And no, this is not a story about, I mean, I thought they could have headlined this, "The Great Global Hot Flash." But they say that because women do more water carrying in the third world, that it's tougher for women. Actually, when you read the story, they say men are already having to travel long distances to go to work in a lot of parts of the what they now call the developing world. When I was a kid, they called it the third world, and so now women are starting to have to walk almost as far as men. Okay, enough about International Women's Day. I hope, you know, however you're celebrating today, everything is just wonderful. But This from California, Blue State Blues. This is crazy. And look, why do we talk about, we do Blue State Blues on the Trent England Show whenever we can, because we hear the voices, you hear the voices, people running down the state of Oklahoma telling us, oh, we're so backward, we don't tax enough, we don't spend enough. If we were just more like California or New York or Connecticut or Illinois, everything would be wonderful. And so we follow the shenanigans. And I find that a lot of the people who say that just honestly, earnestly, they have not lived in other states. They haven't experienced the politics of other states. They have no idea that Connecticut actually went without a budget for months and months and months. They have no idea that the Democratic governor of Connecticut basically admitted that there was no way to raise more revenue by raising taxes because they were driving away so many citizens there. They have no idea that New York State has something like 50,000 giveaways in its tax code, right? They just honestly don't know these things. They don't know that in high tax California, people are fleeing, and they have a hard time figuring out how to pay for their welfare system, which is very generous and therefore creates a disincentive for people to go to work. And again, I mean, you know, you can debate how big these incentives are with welfare programs and socialist programs, but the fact that they're there is indisputable. This from California, Los Angeles Times. So this is not some right-wing publication. This is the Los Angeles Times. Headline, California bullet train cost surges by $2.8 billion. Quote, worst case scenario has happened. If you followed the trials and travails of California's bullet train, originally this was supposed to cost about $6 billion. And then the price tag went up to around $8 billion, and now it has jumped up to $10.6 billion. How many miles of bullet train are they going to build for $10.6 billion? That's a lot of money. I mean, that'd be a lot of money at the federal level, but that's a ton of money when it comes to the state of California. Some of it's federal, some of it's state money. $10.6 billion to build 110 miles of train. Of track. I mean, 110 mile, that is a lot. I mean, just do the math real quick in your head, right? 110 miles, $10.6 billion, that's almost $100 million per mile. I mean, what more can you say? This is crazy. This is crazy. This is unbelievably wasteful. And they are plowing ahead with this in California. And I mean, look, this is, I mean, when you allow the politicians good intentions to just override everything, override all common sense, that's what you get. That's what you get in a blue state. Okay. One more national story, then we're going to play. I've got an interview for you here with some folks from the American Conservative Union. They were in town yesterday. I got to talk with a couple of them about criminal justice reform and the American Conservative Union, why they're involved in criminal justice reform. So that's coming up in just a minute. One more story. This one I saw this morning. This is, I actually want to take just a moment and explain this. I saw this headline, and it was very disturbing to me. The headline is, an anti-Semitic term. This from the Huffington Post. So I shouldn't have been surprised. I mean, Huffington Post is basically clickbait for left-wingers, right? I mean, that's all it is. These stories are poorly written oftentimes, but it's all about the headlines, all about selling advertisements. And the headline is, this anti-Semitic term was casually used during a White House briefing. It's very disturbing to me. I mean, I think anti-Semitism is, is one of the most disgusting facets of, I mean, you could say all of recorded human history, just about. So I thought, I've got to click on this headline. See, they got me. The clickbaiters over at Huffington Post, they got me. I clicked on this. You know what the word is that they're saying is anti-Semitic? But don't just laugh and ignore the rest of what I have to say. I have an explanation for this, for why the people at the Huffington Post are disconnected from reality. The word is globalist. And this is just the funniest thing. So around the, it's funny, it's sad, and there's a reason behind it. So the departure of Gary Cohn, we mentioned this on the show yesterday, Trump's top economic advisor. He's apparently leaving because he disagrees with Donald Trump and agrees with me on tariffs. So I mean, good for him, I guess. Surprising that the president couldn't figure out how to keep one of his closest advisors there, but whatever. he was described as a globalist. He has this view, this free trade view that's sometimes described as globalism. It's not a very descriptive word, but whatever. And apparently globalist is you. So get this. So follow the Huffington Post thing, right? They say that the word globalist is anti-Semitic, but what they mean when you read into the article is that apparently if you're like Huffington Post reporters and you spend all of this time saturating yourself in neo-Nazi propaganda, apparently neo-Nazi propaganda uses the term globalist as a kind of a smear term, right, against people who are, I guess, Jewish, right? I mean, so it makes no sense to normal people. Normal people are not like Huffington, Huffington Post reporters are sitting around reading all this neo-Nazi propaganda because they're convinced that, there's this secret plot of the neo-Nazis and they're in control of everything. And for normal people, for almost all of the rest of us, right, we have no idea what the latest neo-Nazi catchphrase is. And we read stuff like, we go, this is crazy. But it shows, just end my thought with this. It shows the danger, because this can be a danger on the right, this can be a danger on the left. It shows the danger of trying to characterize your opposition in terms of the most extreme, the most absurd, the most vile little fraction of your opposition, and then seeing the whole world through the lens, right? The Huffington Post sees the world through the lens of neo-Nazis, right? You have to either be a Huffington Post reporter or somebody on the far left or a neo-Nazi to see the word globalist as anti-Semitic. For the rest of us, we see the word globalist, we say, oh, it's a sort of an undescriptive word for somebody who sort of believes in low trade barriers around the world, right? But the Huffington Post then gets to say, well, if you're on the left and you use the word globalist, and they actually say this in the article, then it just means sort of free trade stuff. But if you're on the right and you use the word globalist, now we know you're a neo-Nazi, right? That is the insanity of these people at the Huffington Post. And I belabor the point a little bit because we're all subject to this, right? We're all subject to seeing the worst about our opponents. Okay. Let's take just a moment here. Let's run the interview with the American Conservative Union this is from yesterday afternoon. They were here in town. They're going to tell you why. I don't have to tell you why. Here is the clip. Welcome to this special edition of the Trent Show. I'm here with two experts from Washington, D.C. They're from Washington, D.C., and they're here to help. Now, they really are here to help. They're from the American Conservative Union. I know, yeah. We got to give you a little bit of grief. Although we were all just talking before we went live here about the fact I used to live in Washington, D.C., so you do your time and you can get out.
Right.
Not everybody was bad in Sodom or Gomorrah.
That's true. And we're going to be talking about reentry. I think in just a minute we talk criminal justice reform, so maybe this all fits together. But Jackie Anderson and David Safavian are from the American Conservative Union. They're actually here. They just came from the Capitol. And Jackie, I guess you were giving away some awards. Tell folks, what is the American Conservative Union? Yeah. They might not have heard of you, but they probably heard of the big shindig that you throw every year, and then why were you giving awards to state legislators?
Absolutely. So the ACU is the American Conservative Union. We've been around since 1964, and we are a we call ourselves an umbrella term or umbrella organization for the conservative movement. So it's more about the philosophy of what conservatism is, and not necessarily ideology. So one of the large events that we do every year is, of course, CPAC, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of. We just wrapped up CPAC this year.
How many people were there?
We don't have a final count now, but quite a few, and that number tends to go up every single year. So we're looking forward to getting that final number back.
Good deal. And state legislators. So you went from CPAC to the Oklahoma State Capitol.
Yeah, so part of what we do, we have a foundation, a C3, the ACU Foundation, and that foundation does a lot of things. We've got a lot of different issue areas and policy initiatives. One of the things that we do is we've got a team that does research in the states and on the federal level, and we issue state ratings, and we issue for all 50 states, and we do federal ratings. We've been doing the federal ratings since 1974, and we've been doing the state ratings since 2011. So we're here to talk a lot about criminal justice reform, a lot about our policy initiatives that the foundation does, and part of why we're here is to give those awards to conservative members who have earned high scores. We just got back from the Capitol. We got to shake some hands and meet some folks of the people that we have scored and rated pretty highly. So that was a really fun event.
That's great. How many legislators won awards?
So we had 13 from Oklahoma.
Okay.
So it's pretty good. And we're always happy to just sort of look folks in the eye and say, look, we get it. You know, we don't want to sort of sit on an iron throne in Washington, D.C. and tell the states how this goes. So we do pick up the call or the phone and we call these folks and say, you know, we want to know why these votes are going this way. Either this looks really good, this maybe looks not so good. You know, we don't know what the priorities are. So we want to make sure that we're talking to the folks on the ground so that they can sort of paint a full picture of what the landscape here in Oklahoma looks like. So we know a lot of these guys, but we haven't gotten to meet them yet. So for us, it was this neat sort of reunion. So we got to thank them, we got to meet them. It was a good time.
Very cool. So you are the director of policy at ACU, and one of those policies is criminal justice reform, which I think, you know, some people know that there are folks on the left who work on that issue, but American Conservative Union, why is that a fit?
Well, criminal justice reform is as important as almost every single other issue. I mean, you hear a lot about politics, and then you hear, well, the budget's really important, or the social issues are really important, or the defense budget is really important too. Criminal justice reform is equally as important, and we don't just look at it as sort of a cut and dry policy issue or a policy area. For us, it really does go down to a human dignity issue as well. We are human beings before we fall anywhere on the political spectrum, and so we don't agree in sort of either of the extremes. You know, lock everyone up as much as you possibly can. We also don't agree with sort of the ideology behind just opening up the doors and freeing everyone, because you obviously have to be held accountable for whatever crime is committed. But what we do like to focus on what is best for families and making sure that families are taken care of and as unified as they possibly can be. What's the best for the landscape of the state? What's the best for the economy? So a lot of different factors sort of go into that. And so we like to think that we have, not to use a sort of granola term here, but we do sort of look at this issue as a very holistic, multifaceted, and multi-layered issue area. And we think that's very, very important in terms of how you marry all these variables and get to what is really a substantive point of view and perspective on what criminal justice reform, especially from a conservative perspective, should look like.
Yes, I really think, I mean, conservatism means understanding human nature, and it just seems like only conservatives can actually bring common sense to criminal justice. David, this is your area. What are the priorities?
So let me take one step back, because you asked kind of why ACU is involved in this, and Jackie makes very good points about human dignity. We're all about limited government. Conservatives at the core are skeptical about growth in government. And we should be equally skeptical about the growth of government when that agency or that person has the power to take your life away, put you in jail, or take your freedom away, or take your things away. And so our approach to criminal justice reform really goes to property rights as well, your dignity of the person and your freedom. We get involved in this, and we start with the perspective that public safety has to be first. People will pay as much as they need to be safe. But that doesn't mean that locking people up for long periods of time, throwing away the key, is the answer to safety. In fact, what we've seen over and over again in states where we do this all the time is that there is a better, smarter way that cuts the cost of government, reduces incarceration rates, makes people safer, and saves money. And unfortunately, Oklahoma is at that point in our list where they're one of the top 5 incarcerators in the country. You look at what we've done in Texas, what we've done in Georgia, what we've done in South Carolina, states that are not blue by any stretch of the imagination. And they have been able to find success in criminal justice while making people safer.
Yeah, which is a little bit counterintuitive. I mean, why does that happen? Because I think it's very easy to say the more people we put in jail, the more people we put in prison, the safer we're going to be. Right. Why does it not always work out that way?
So I hear that all the time. And I think there are a couple of ways to respond to that. One is, if you put a violent person in jail in the same cell as a nonviolent person, who's going to come out looking like the other? And I think that's a pretty patently obvious case for human nature. 97% of all the people that are in jail are going to come back out and be our neighbors, are going to be in our community. And so what the way we have figured this out is, if you cut the incarceration rate so that we're not locking up nonviolent offenders for such long periods of time, we save enormous amounts of money. We can take a small portion of that money and provide programming, anti-recidivism programming, drug treatment, anger management, programs that have proven themselves to work. And by doing so, we cut recidivism. Right now, about half of all the people coming out of Oklahoma's prisons will end up right back in. And what that means is that's another crime, another victim, another court case, and another statistic.
Which is not that surprising, because about half the people in our prisons either have a mental health problem or an addiction problem or both. Right. So it's, I mean, it always has seemed, when you get into those numbers, surprising to me that people think, well, you know, you open the doors, you kind of see that scene that you know, that they have in the movies. You got the guy standing there at the gate, and you know, everything's going to be fine from there. That doesn't really work.
There's no happily ever after when they walk out if they still have a drug problem, if they still have a mental health problem, if they can't find a job, if they have no family and support structure. It's no surprise that the revolving door of prisons swings faster and faster. And so by reducing that level of incarceration, really only focusing on the nonviolent people, right? A guy named Grover Norquist, head of Americans for Tax Reform, said it best. He said,
he was just on the show 3 days ago.
Grover's an amazing guy. And he said it best. He said we should be locking up people we're afraid of, not just the people that we're mad at. And by doing that, we save the money. That creates a fund that we can provide more programming, help these guys and gals become better people while they're in, and then they become less of a threat when they come out. And that's been the key to lowering crime rates in other red states across the country.
So you think Oklahoma has a good shot at actually achieving that?
So we've been working in Oklahoma for the better part of 2 years. And last year we came very close. There was one single elected official who stood in the way. He went into hiding so that the bill wouldn't move forward. He's no longer in the legislature. We're on the precipice of doing some good things. My understanding is that the governor, the legislative leadership, the Chamber of Commerce, and the prosecutors have all kind of decided we need to come together and find a deal, and we're waiting to see the details of the deal.
Well, that would be exciting to watch that. I think even just this week we're going to get more of those details rolling out. David Safavian, Jackie Anderson from the American Conservative Union. What's the website? How do people stay in touch?
If anyone wants more information, you can find us on Twitter at ACU Conservative or ACU Foundation, or you can go to our website at conservative.org. We make it very, very easy for folks to find us.
Excellent. And they can go to CPAC next year. They
can, and there's information for our CJR Center as well.
Yeah, if you're interested in more information about criminal justice reform and how we're doing it from a conservative perspective, it's conservativejusticereform.com.
Excellent. Jackie, David, thank you so much for being on the Trent England Show.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so thanks again to Jackie and David from ACU for coming out to Oklahoma. They headed from here to Phoenix, I think, so they're hopping all around the country. We were glad to host them yesterday. It was pointed out to me during the break. I mentioned the story out of California, $10.2 billion to build 110 miles of train track. That's about, just to put it in context, this was pointed out to me, that's about the distance between Oklahoma City and Tulsa, for more than $10 billion to build a train, except I believe that where the train is in California, it's even flatter, right? That, you know, the turnpike kind of goes up and down. A lot of, you know, the Central Valley of California is pretty straightforward, so to speak, pretty flat. So, yeah, $100 million per mile, just about. Okay, one more story to wrap up. Teacher strike back and forth, and maybe it was going to be early April, then it was going to be April 23rd. Now the Oklahoma Education Association is saying, no, it's going to be April 2nd. They're coming back and saying that, and look, this is, the politics of this are fascinating. There's a story in the Oklahoman this morning that makes some big mistakes because all of the reporting, and here's one thing I'll throw out there. If you're a teacher, if you're related to a teacher, connected to a teacher who's not excited about this, I keep getting all these anecdotes. I was hearing from people just yesterday telling me, yeah, you know, I have a friend who's a teacher. She's really mad that they're talking about going on strike. She doesn't want that to happen. Hearing from a legislator yesterday saying, I'm getting angry calls to my office. People are already mad about the idea of a teacher strike. But for the media, it's easier to go to to go to the union, to go to the groups that have, spokesmen, and to get their point of view. And for all the people out there who are mad, all the people out there who are upset, at this point, this is what we pointed out on the program. This is what changes with an actual teacher strike is all of a sudden those people get more vocal. But look, if your voice isn't being heard now, try to make your voice heard now. I think that it will be a catastrophic mistake if teachers actually go out on strike, just for the effect that it'll have on kids, right? This is going to upset AP testing, end-of-year testing, people trying to get into college, people trying to transition out of high school, whether they're juniors or seniors. There are important things that happen at the end of those school years, right? I mean, this is, and look, this is a shoot the hostage strategy, right? That's what a strike, especially a strike orchestrated this way to do maximum harm to the students. That's what that is all about. And moving the date later in April was at least sort of an olive branch to the legislature and to students and families, and now pulling it back. And again, this is the Oklahoma Education Association basically is trying to orchestrate all this. A tiny fraction of Oklahoma teachers actually belong to the Oklahoma Education Association, right? A tiny fraction of Oklahoma teachers want to be associated with an organization that is part of a national umbrella group that calls for radical gun bans, that supports single-payer health care, that supports abortion on demand, right? The National Education Association, of which the OEA is a part, is a radical left-wing organization. And so it's unsurprising that it represents a small percentage of Oklahoma teachers. But you read the paper, and it sounds like the OEA represents everybody. It's shocking. One more problem with the story that's in the paper today. It includes this statement, which is just dead flat wrong. And I'm going to ask the Oklahoman for a correction, and if they have any credibility at all, they will correct it. The statement is this. This is in the story about the potential teacher strike this morning in the Oklahoman. It says, Oklahoma has a uniquely high hurdle for increasing taxes, requiring a 3/4 vote of the legislature. That is wrong. Longtime viewers and listeners know that that's wrong. The Oklahoma Constitution actually says this. We can pull it up for you. This is Article 5, Section 33, subsection C. Sorry to go legally, sort of legal wonky on you here for a second, but this is really important. This is basic Oklahoma Constitution stuff. Any revenue bill originating in the House of Representatives shall not become effective until it has been referred to the people of the state at the next general election held throughout the state, and shall become effective and be enforced when it has been approved by a majority of the votes cast on the measure at such election, and not otherwise, except as otherwise provided in the next section. And then it goes on to say, well, you don't have to send it to a vote of the people if the House passes it with 3/4 and the Senate passes it with 3/4. That's an exception to the rule. And I don't understand why journalists can't get this, right? Again, basic Oklahoma State Constitution stuff. This isn't the flashpoint of kerosene. This isn't all the complicated and convoluted stuff in the Constitution. This is really clear, basic, and important to the current debate going on about tax increases and how the legislature works. What it says, it's a 3 simple majority requirement. That's what the Oklahoma Constitution includes. Simple majority in the House, simple majority in the Senate, simple majority of the people, except that you don't have to get a simple majority of the people if you get a supermajority in the House and a supermajority in the Senate, right? But the primary rule is 3 simple majorities, power in the hands of Oklahoma voters. I understand why some legislators want to pretend like that's not the case, because they're scared. I pointed this out before. They're scared of voters. They don't want to send their ideas to voters, because if voters disagree with them, it'll become really clear through that process, right? So they want to pretend like that doesn't exist, but we ought to expect a little bit more from our journalists. They ought to get it right. Again, this is pretty simple stuff. We'll keep following all this on the Trent England Show. I'm going to put all these links up after the show flips over into archive mode here in a little while. You can find it on Facebook. You can find it on YouTube. You can subscribe on iTunes. You can listen to the podcast on SoundCloud. You can find our archives at ocpathink.org. It's all there at ocpathink.org. Radio archives, video show archives, and some other things that I write from time to time as well. I'm Trent England. Thank you so much for watching the show this morning.